Coming to you from the very active state capitol in Frankfort, Kentucky, I'm Barbara Deeb. On this edition of Outlook, we're going to meet with area legislators and Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear at the midpoint of the regular session. Stay with us. Outlook is next. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. The crew has hit the road. We are coming to you from the state capitol in Frankfort, Kentucky. We're midway through the 2015 session. We thought it would be a great time to catch up with our area legislators. In particular, Speaker Pro Tem, Representative Jody Richards. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming today. We were looking forward to your coming to visit us.
Thank you, and for arranging all of this. But Speaker Pro Tem, I really have to catch myself after so many years of calling you House Speaker. So tell us the difference, distinguish for our audience, what differentiates Speaker
Pro
Tem?
Tem is is essentially second in command. It is like the Lieutenant Governor, except I have constitutional duties that really are more specified, and it's a part of the 5-member leadership team, and I have actually presided quite a bit during this session. I preside in case the Speaker has a bill or for other reasons does not want to preside. So I've done it quite a bit, and I enjoy it. It's fun, and we try to keep it light on the floor when I'm there.
And you know people are going to ask you, of course, which one you like better. This one might be a little less harried than the other?
Well, I enjoyed being Speaker and had fun with it. But this is an opportunity to be back in House leadership, and that is important to our area of the state because we have a seat at the table. And I'm so happy to have Representative DeCesare and certainly Senator Givens as my counterpart in the Senate as President Pro Tem.
So yes, plus Johnny Bell. We've got a bunch
and
of
certainly Johnny Bell. Johnny is doing a great job as the whip.
Let's talk about some specifics. As I mentioned, midway through the 2015 regular session, what's happening? Are we proud of what? I usually like to ask you to give it a grade. You ready to do that?
Well, you know, I would give the House an A at this point. We've passed the heroin bill, which I think is an outstanding bill. We've passed the bill on dating violence, which we've tried to do several times, and I think it is a good bill. Several others that are important, and I think we've used our time very well. These short sessions are very compact, and a lot of bills are coming out of committee, and we're really, we left on Monday. We went in at 4 and left about 8 o'clock, and then I had a committee meeting after that, so I actually went to supper at 9 o'clock. I mean, we're really
packing it all in.
Yes.
Let's talk about this heroin bill. What people may not realize in the state of Kentucky is that there is a real issue with heroin abuse. The House bill differed from what's going to the Senate in that it has a needle exchange, and then there's a 3-tier, for the offenders, how they're going to be affected.
When we passed the prescription drug bill, we really dried up a lot of the abuses in prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. So what we've done now is then it's popped up. It seems like if you push down over here, the drug trade moves up over here. And what has happened is that heroin is a cheaper type of drug and apparently gives a big high from what I've been told. And it's really apparently appealing to young folks. And so our bill, the important thing about our bill, in my judgment, is that it emphasizes treatment rather than incarceration for those people who are first-time offenders. Now, for the hardened drug dealers, I don't care how long they stay in prison. But for I had a woman to talk with me the other day about a niece in another part of the state who was 20 years old and on heroin, and she didn't want that niece incarcerated. She wanted her to go into some sort of treatment program. We don't want to make these disposable people. We want to try to treat them and bring them back into productive citizens in society.
This is not a budget year per se, and yet the legislature did address KTRS and the lack of funding there.
Well, we thought it was the right thing to do, and we'll see what the Senate does with it. It is a big bond. However, at this time, if we can make several percent on a bond, we thought it was the right thing to do to stabilize the KTRS, the Teachers Retirement System. I think that the KERS has been stabilized because, although some people will differ with me, I think over a 20-year period that it has been stabilized because workers will have to work longer, their contributions are higher, the employer contributions are higher. So I think we've got it in decent shape. So the KTRS, retired teachers, everyone wants to help our teachers and retired teachers. So it passed the House with 62 votes, and I think it's the right thing to do.
And we'll leave it at that. I wish we had more time. We'll get you in after the session closes back in the studio, but a special thanks to our Speaker Pro Tem, Jody Richards. More of Outlook after this. Outlook continues. We're coming to you from the state capitol in Frankfort, and we're very honored and pleased to have with us our Representative Jim DeCesare, Republican, who represents the 17th District of Kentucky and is also assuming a leadership role this year, House Republican Whip. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what the role of the whip is.
Well, the whip traditionally is the person who whips up the votes.
Okay.
And that's what I do. I go around and get vote counts and talk to members about if they're leaning one way or the other, maybe trying to convince them that they may need to go a certain way. That's the main role of a whip, but we have a three-man leadership team, unlike the majority party where they have 5 people. So we also deal with policy, tactic, all the things necessary to make sure that the policy initiatives that we want or don't want are taken care of.
So, the fact that our region of the state has so many in leadership,
right,
that's a real advantage for our area, isn't it?
It really is, and it doesn't matter which party you're in, because as Jody Richards and I always say, when it comes to Warren County, we're going to work together and try to do as much as we can to protect our area, South Central Kentucky. And so when we have someone from both sides in the leadership role, including Johnny Bell, that does give us a distinct advantage where we can work together on certain issues that are important for South Central Kentucky and for WKU. And for
WKU, while we're talking about WKU and education, let's talk about KTRS.
Sure.
The 2015 session is not intended as a budget session.
That's correct.
And yet there was an issue related to Kentucky's teacher retirement that had to be addressed.
Right.
And it was.
I don't know that it had to be addressed in the way that it was. It is an issue that we need to look at, but I think borrowing $3.3 billion without really getting some consensus, understanding how it's going to completely work and where the money's going to come from to pay for it, those discussions need to be had first before we pass the legislation borrowing money. I think the Republican Party in the House had an alternative plan that would fund the first year as it would be if they borrowed the money. That way we could study the issue a little more, decide what kind of changes need to be made to the system, if any, and then determine how to go forward with the funding. But the way it stands now, we just borrowed, and we haven't done it yet officially, but we passed legislation that would allow Kentucky to borrow $3.3 billion, which would basically is about a third of our total borrowed money right now.
But it's in bonds. And
It's in bonds.
It's a little bit different than.
That's right. So, you know, you're looking at about $1 billion in payments over the next 30 years in a $10 billion a year budget. So 10% of our total budget would go towards this pension system.
Is this a stopgap measure, in your opinion? It
No.
will certainly be readdressed.
The problem is that if anything happens in the market, like happened in 2008, this would all be for naught, because that money would be gone. And in fact, the 3.3 billion would only take the unfunded liability from about 56% at most to about 63%. So it's not a huge difference. And plus, some of the bonded money would be used for annual payments for other things, not for the unfunded liability. And that's a big issue. You're not supposed to use money that way when you're borrowing it to fund the system. You shouldn't be using it to make payments for other things as well. So there was a lot of red flags in the bill. I couldn't support it. I couldn't support that amount of debt without some assurances. And I think we need to look at the program and figure out where we need to fix it. And I think KTRS has a little skin in this too, because they've really been out there telling the retired teachers especially that the sky is falling. And it's not falling. They're still getting their payments. But the part that's really shameful almost is that they're saying if we don't do this now, then it's not going to be there in the future. And they're also telling them that we haven't been keeping up with our payments. Well, since 2010, we've already borrowed nearly $1 billion for the teachers' retirement system, twice to shore up the funding in the pension system itself, and once to take care of the health insurance issue. So now that'll always be taken care of. So it's not like we haven't been doing anything. And when you look at the overall unfunded liability of the program, the General Assembly is only responsible for 9% of that unfunded liability.
People are not aware of that.
Yeah, the other part is, you know, bad investments, bad markets, and other factors that come into play.
I always ask you this, and I asked Jody Richards, I have to ask you, if you were to grade the legislative session as we stand at just a little past the midpoint, what kind of grade would you give it?
Wow. You know, this session has been a little different than most short sessions because we've had so many high-level issues. I would say right now, I'd have to give us a C. And it's not because we're not doing anything. I think it's because of the quality of the legislation and some of the issues that we're taking on, and like the teachers' retirement system, the way we're addressing them. It's not A material stuff. It's not B material stuff. It's mediocre, and we can do better.
Jim DeCesare, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always good to see you.
Republican Senator Mike Wilson now joins us, representing District 32 in Kentucky. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Well, thanks, Barb. I'm glad to be here.
We were just talking with two representatives, and in particular, we addressed the KTRS issue and the funding for the bonds, the $3.3 billion in bonds. It's probably headed to the Senate now. How's the Senate looking on that issue?
Well, Barb, I have to tell you that first and foremost, I think every senator over there is very concerned about the KTRS and making sure that we can keep the promises that we've made, especially to our teachers, because they're taking care of our most valuable asset. But I don't think there's a lot of appetite for bonding, and there are many reasons for that, particularly that if we bond it at the $3.3 billion, you know, we're going to be talking about money coming out of the general fund budget. For that, there's an argument that they're using their own money, but they're still, you know, in the end, $100-something million that has to come out of the general fund. And ultimately, to pay the debt service on that in the end, if we do that and go down that road, I mean, you're looking at teachers not getting raises for quite some time, and you're only increasing the funding level by just a few percentage points from where it is now. And I think that we need to have that discussion. And everybody there agrees we need to have the discussion. but we need to find out what's the best viable possibility that we can do to solve this problem on a long-term basis.
So the Senate hasn't come up with its own alternative to that?
Not at this point, but I know that there's going to be discussions in regards to that. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen with it. That's just kind of some general conversations that we've had back there.
Well, help us understand, and our viewers understand, that as this legislative session that we're in the midst of right now, it was not intended as a budget session.
Right.
And yet this issue of the KTRS funding came up and was looked at.
Well, the budget session happens next year. It's every 2 years that we do the 2-year budget. And so when you're looking at something like this, trying to plan ahead and do that, authorize these bonds and that kind of thing, I know that they're trying to get ahead of the game, which we understand that. But generally, if you're going to do budget items, you have to open the budget. And that's always not a good thing because typically we've kind of run short over these last few years, and they've had to do things like sweep accounts and this, that, and the other. So that's generally not a good idea to open the budget.
Kind of like a Pandora's box. Once that box is opened.
As soon as you open the budget, then you have everybody else come in and will give us this. And that's the other side of it. We did a fix, which I agree it's a first step for the KRS. And we knew that once we did it, it was going to go down a couple of years before it actually turned around. So we have to give it time. So immediately when they're asking for the bonding for the KTRS, then now we have the KRS said, if you're going to bond them, you need to bond us. And so, yeah, when you start doing deals like that, then everybody wants to come and more money. It's always an issue. We need more money.
We always need more money.
That's why we need tax reform.
Okay, and we'll talk about tax reform, but we're not going to have enough time to do that. But you think tax reform is something that absolutely has to happen? Absolutely,
I think it does. And our hopes are that, next session, again, I think it's something we need to do with a legislative task force, the ones that are involved in making those decisions, so we can have some sort of bipartisan agreement, just like we did on the pension. With the KRS, we came together and we had some recommendations that was bipartisan, and ultimately we were able to get that done. Tax is much more complicated, I think, and you're going to have a lot of agreement on what we're going to do on that. So I think you need to do that ahead of time.
I asked the other legislators who joined us to go ahead and rate the session as it stands, as of today, on this day. What kind of grade would you give it?
Well, on the midterm, if I was just giving out midterm grades right now, I'd probably give it a C.
Oh.
And but I would have to wait till the end for the final exam to see what comes out of it to really give it an overall grade.
We'll get that overall grade. We'll get you in the studio when the session's over. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
We've been talking with Senator Mike Wilson, representing District 32. Outlook continues, and we're very pleased and honored to have the governor of the great state of Kentucky, Governor Steve Beshear, joins us in his house. This is your place. This is your land, Frankfort. It's a beautiful place.
Well, this capital's where I go to work every day, and of course the governor's mansion's right across the street. You know, we've got one of the most beautiful campuses for a state government in the country.
We do, and it's an honor to be here. And thank you for taking time for us. Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues facing the great state of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And one of those is indeed the expansion of Medicaid. And you say it's something that has to be done.
Well, it's been wildly successful for the first part, but I'll tell you why we did it. When you look at our health rankings, we are right at the bottom. You know, we're either among the worst or the worst in every major health condition, you know, whether that's heart disease, diabetes, obesity, you name it, and we're bad in it. And we're never going to be a leader in every sense of the word in this country until we have a healthy population. You know, one of the reasons that you need a healthy population is so it's a productive workforce. And then you attract more jobs, and companies want to be here because you've got such a great workforce. Well, that workforce has to be healthy as well as trained and educated. So when the Affordable Care Act came along, I jumped at it. I don't care whose name's on it, and I don't care which president passed it. What I care about is the people of this Commonwealth and the families and the children out here. Let's get them healthy. and this gave us an opportunity to do that. So we put in our own exchange, we expanded the Medicaid program, and just in the first year, Barbara, it's just been amazing. Over 500,000 Kentuckians now have affordable health insurance. Many of them never had health insurance in their lives. Our people are already starting to get healthier. The thousands of people who are getting screenings for things like breast cancer and colon cancer and all of the things that we can catch early and therefore prevent or cure, and then you know, you've got a healthy lifestyle that you can have. And I had a study done first before I made the decision to project and see whether we could afford to do it, and they said yes. PricewaterhouseCoopers came in and said, Governor, you really can't afford not to do this. And so I made the decision, and then after a year of actual numbers, let's see where we really are and see how those projections are working out. Well, they had projected that we would create a total of about 17,000 new jobs over the next 8 years. Well, I brought Deloitte in to give us a kind of a recap of the first year and project on top of those actual numbers. And they said, you've already created 12,000 new jobs in the first year. You're going to really create about 40,000 new jobs by the time this is all said and done in 8 years. And there's going to be about a $30 billion infusion of money, economic impact in the Commonwealth over those 8 years. And so it's the right thing to do, number one, morally, I think, just for our people. If there's a way we can make them healthier, if it's a way that we can get our kids to have a better life, we ought to do it. And secondly, it's apparently the economically right thing to do.
Well, we're talking economics. You are headed to Canada come this spring, and you are going to search out additional economic opportunities there. Do you anticipate that you'll be successful in that effort?
I think we'll have another successful effort there. You know, when I came into office at the end of 2007, this great recession had just hit us flat in the face.
Timing, do we call that timing?
Oh man, I tell you, that wasn't really what I ran for governor to deal with, but you have to deal with whatever you've got. And so we hit the ground running with just one idea, and that was, let's get our people back to work as fast as we can. Let's find the jobs that we can. Let's keep the companies that we already have so that we have something to build on. And you know, a lot of states didn't do the kinds of things we did, and they're still sort of suffering the effects. We're coming out of this roaring. And that doesn't mean we're where we ought to be at the end, because we've still got people that don't have a job, and we're still working on that. But you know, in the last 7 years, we've created about 50,000 new jobs, and there's been about $10 billion in new business investment in the Commonwealth. Down in your area, in the Bowling Green, that whole area down there in South Central Kentucky, it's been one of the hottest spots in the whole state for us. And we have located business after business and expanded business after business and created thousands of new jobs just in that Bowling Green area. Obviously, it's an extremely attractive place for people to be, with Western, with just everything that we have there. It's been a phenomenal success story.
Well, you know, for a long time we were looking at Japanese companies to locate here, and many did. And now Canada offers some opportunities?
See, Canada is our biggest trading partner. People don't really realize that, but just north of us is our biggest trading partner. We just located in your area a Canadian company, Champion Pet Foods. It's the premier pet food made in Canada, and they are locating over in Logan County, right next to you. They're investing, I've forgotten how many millions of dollars, but they're going to create about 250 new jobs. And in addition to just the new jobs, they're going to buy locally. They're going to buy all their produce and meat and all of that from the farmers in that area. So that's just turning that dollar over more and more and creating even more jobs. So that kind of effort we've been doing now for 7 years. We've got companies from all over the world now in Kentucky, Indian companies, European companies, Asian companies. You know, it's going extremely well, and we're just going to keep at it.
There you go. Keep on keeping on. We are here at the midpoint of the 2015 regular session. Would you like to comment on how you feel the session is going?
I feel good about where we're going. You know, I know when people out in the state see some of the news accounts, oh, they blew up on this or they're arguing about that. That always happens. But we've got some serious people up here on both sides of the aisle, the House and the Senate, both very serious, Republicans and Democrats, both very serious, and we figured out how to work together. I mean, that's the key to this. You know, when people look at Washington, D.C., they throw their hands up and say, my gosh, I don't want anything to do with
How do
government.
they get anything done?
Yeah,
Yes.
and they don't. But here we do. We have been able to, we're partisan in our elections. We run hard, we campaign hard, but when they're over with, I've gotten both Republicans and Democrats in the legislature to sort of remember that we're Kentuckians first and Democrats and Republicans second. And when you do that, you can get a lot of good things done, and you're going to see some good things done. You're going to see a heroin bill that will attack this epidemic that's just literally killing our people, and we're going to get that done. A dating violence bill. We're the last state, I think, in the nation not to protect folks that are in a dating relationship from violence. We're going to get that done. I think we're going to pass the public-private partnership legislation, which allows us to, as a government, to partner with the private sector and build some of the infrastructure that we need. Booster seats, you know, we need to revise and upgrade our booster seat law to protect our kids even more than they're protected now. So lots of good things going on, and I think people at the end of the day are going to be really pleased with the results.
You know, you gave me so many segues. At the end of the day, how are they going to, I want to wax philosophical with you for a moment, if I may. You know, in a year, you're going to be a free man, so to speak. And as we reflect on the Beshear, what do you want the legacy to be, the Beshear legacy?
Well, you know, that's a big word. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that because I feel like that's going to be sort of defined for me. Other people are going to look at what we've done or not done, and they'll figure that out. Obviously, one of our legacies will be health care reform and getting the people in our state covered. Our uninsured rate in Kentucky in 1 year has gone from over 20% to 9%. Just think about that Kentuckians now for the first time are getting health coverage. And that'll be a big deal, I think, for the next generation. We may not see the results just next week or next year, but over the next generation, you're going to see a lot of results. We've done so much in education. We raised our dropout age thanks to the First Lady. I mean, that was one of her driving issues, and boy, she stuck with it. It took us 6 years to get it done, but because of her persistence, we got it done. And in economic development, you know, the coming out of this recession the way we have, I'm proud of it, and it's not just me. It is our local leadership in communities like Bowling Green and other places that have partnered with us to make ourselves attractive and attract these jobs. And you know, if I can leave a state where people are employed again and making good salaries and good wages and are getting the kind of education they need to succeed in this world and are getting health care, that's a pretty good legacy.
Thank you for taking the time. We've been talking with Kentucky's Governor, Steve Beshear. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Outlook, coming to you from our state capitol in Frankfort. I'm Barbara Deeb. Thanks for joining us.